So indoor environmental myth. Indoor air is healthier than outdoor air. That's a biggie. EPA says no. 90% of 90% of Americans are spending their time indoors, which makes indoor air very important. And they don't mean indoor at our home. They mean, if you think about it, you sleep, you get up in the morning, which most of us sleep indoors. We get up, brush our teeth, comb our hair, go to work. Where are we going to work? Either in a bus or a car, which means we're indoors again. We leave that, go to our office. Some people go to construction sites, but a lot of people office environments where we spend another 8, 9, 10 hours. Then we get back in our car and then we come home. This time of year, we're not going usually out to do anything except maybe walk the dog. So if you look at it, there really are a lot of people spending time indoors. And since 1990, the EPA has consistently ranked indoor air pollution as one of the top 5 environmental risks to public health. The common indoor air pollutants that they're finding is fuel-burning combustion appliances. That's a really good one. I had a friend of mine call and tell me, you know, we just shut up the house. I was feeling really good. Now I'm getting headaches. Could you come, stop by, check out what's going on? They live in a little like cabin. It's really, really cute. But I walked into the cabin and knew right away why she was getting headaches. They had propane fireplaces. They're beautiful, but she didn't have enough exhaust for them. She needed to get more fresh air, get those exhausted out. A lot of people don't realize those little things that can really make you sick. Her first comment was, well, you have propane fireplaces too, but I also have cathedral ceilings in my house. So, and my husband's really good at HVAC, so we've got that fresh air coming in. Tobacco products, everybody should know now with all the commercialization that tobacco is not good for us. Smoking in the house is not good for us, but I'm over 60. I will admit that I was a 70s child. I was very rebellious, so I did smoke. And I didn't, as I got older, I continued to smoke. And guess where I smoked? I smoked in the house with my kids. So we have to worry about all the impacts that we've had from the destruction that we did during the times when we didn't know. I don't know. I was a part of that whole lobbying with Philip Morris that tobaccos aren't good. Tobacco is good for you. And of course, we found out that we're wrong. Building materials and furnishings, all the off-gassing that comes from them. Household chemicals. Another friend lived up in Thurmont, Maryland, asked me to stop by her house because she and her husband were having a dilemma. She was getting headaches every time she was doing dishes. And some of you have heard this story that have heard me before, but she was getting headaches every time she did dishes, and her husband didn't believe her. He just thought she wanted to get out of doing dishes. So he started doing dishes. She didn't have headaches, but she really wanted to prove to him there was a reason why. So I walked in the kitchen, asked to be Snoopy, looked at the cupboards, looked under the cupboards. We're under the cupboards, and underneath their sink. I do this too. We're all guilty of the hoarding thing when we don't have time to clean up. She had thrown her Dawn dish liquid in there, her scrubbing bubbles, her bleach, her paint strippers from when she had done some stripping in the kitchen, and then of course the leftover paint, and about 15 other chemicals in there. A lot of people think that when they close the lid to those chemicals that they're no longer getting vapors released, but that's not true. No matter how tight you close it, it releases a vapor. We could have done a lot of testing for her, but the common sense says that either one of those vapors she was sensitive to and her husband's not, or it could have been when the combination of 2 or 3 or all of those vapors making a very unique toxin that her husband was not sensitive to, but she was, and that was causing her headaches. Lots and lots of indoor problems come from our HVAC units, improper maintenance or improper use. Everybody's starting to use more of the humidification devices, which if improperly used can also cause pollution. Even more so, it attracts our bugs and our pests to come in. It gives them a good environment to flourish, that excess moisture. Excess moisture is a pollutant, and then outdoor sources. And we're bringing stuff in, the pesticides that we use to get on our feet and we track them in the house, radon, and then of course regular indoor pollution. All of those are our most common indoor air pollutions. When we do investigations for a client that maybe their employees are going to sue them because they say their inside's making them sick. The number one thing that we find, 80% of them are due to mold, so biological contaminants. Another myth, cooking disinfects our food and therefore is also a great disinfectant for our environment. Per the World Health Association, around 3 billion people cook using open fires, simple stoves fueled by kerosene, fueled by biomass, and fueled by coal. Obviously, we are polluting our environment with our cooking. Per the World Health Association, each year close to 4 million people die prematurely from illnesses attributable to household air pollution from inefficient cooking practices, polluting stoves, paired with the solid fuels and kerosenes that we use. Again, World Health Association, indoor air pollution causes non-communicable diseases, so that you're not spreading them, but it still contributes to strokes, coronary, heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. I'm going to, like, my tongue's going to get caught here. COPD, lung cancer, things like that. Close to half of the deaths due to pneumonia among children under 5 is caused by particulate matter, which is caused by soot. For those of you who love burning candles in your house, not a really good indoor air thing if you don't have the house properly ventilated, fresh air coming in. So it gets inhaled into our lungs. It's great what happened in the 70s. Again, 70s and 80s, we went through this whole energy thing. We started to become very, very efficient. We wanted to make our houses really tight. They did a great job of it. And 5-10 years into that, they learned that the problem with making we don't have to change making our houses tight, but the problem with making our houses tight is that we are now trapped with that indoor air pollution. We circulate it. We are not. We can't get away from it. So the idea is the one benefit that we can now do, that we know we have to do, is properly control the indoor environment and control the pollutants, and when we do find a pollutant, go after the source. One of the seminars that I did for a bunch of realtors, they said, you know, you're scaring us to death with all this indoor air thing, you know, that maybe you're just raising the flag too much. But in reality, our indoor environment and our health are directly related to each other. So it's very, very important to focus a little bit on indoor environment. We don't have to walk around fearful, but we should take some time out of our busy schedules to put some time into evaluating all of our indoor environments, making them healthy so that we don't have to think about them anymore, and then have regular checkups so that we can keep our environment healthy. Next myth, ozone generators. Now, I'm not talking about the high-powered industrial ozone generators that indoor environmentalists use to clean up the environment, like this one. I am talking about those new air filtration systems that come out and that advertise that they generate ozone, and that helps control our indoor air pollution. So those ozone generators are effective in controlling indoor air pollution. False. Per the EPA, available scientific evidence shows that at concentrations that do not exceed public health standards, ozone has little potential to remove indoor air contaminants. Using the big, powerful industrial ozones to clean up an indoor environmental, very, very, very good. But the little bit of concentrations, because they have to go by EPA regulations and they can't put it out to high concentrations that could make a difference, they are not working the way that they originally thought that they would. The other thing is that they're finding people, especially people with COPD or that have lung diseases, are actually being impacted because they can't smell it. They don't know what's going on, but they notice that their lung challenge is being irritated. Some manufacturers suggest that ozone will render almost every chemical contaminant harmless by producing a chemical reaction whose only byproduct are carbon dioxide, oxygen, and water. That's very misleading. Scientific research shows that ozone generators are not effective at removing carbon monoxide or formaldehyde. Many of the chemicals, for many of the chemicals with the ozone does readily react, the reaction can only form a variety of harmful or irritating byproducts. For people who are very, very sensitive, just so you know, we have several different types of people when it comes to indoor environmental issues and how they react to it. I tell the story all the time about my husband and I. My husband could go sleep in a patch of poison ivy and never get poison ivy. If my dog runs through poison ivy and gets downwind from me and the wind hits me, I'm going to have poison ivy from my head to my toes. I'm going to be covered with it. That's sensitivity. His sensitivity, not so great. My sensitivity, very high. It's the same way with indoor pollutants and indoor environmental issues. You will have people who can work in a moldy environment and never be impacted. People who can work around chemicals and never be impacted. You have another group of people that are hospitalized because of the reactions to their indoor environment, and then you have everything in between. So that's something to understand when you're dealing with indoor environmental pollution. For example, in a laboratory experiment that mixed ozone with chemicals from new carpet, ozone reduced many of these chemicals, including those which can produce that new carpet odor. In the process, the reaction produced a variety of aldehydes, increased the total concentration of organic chemicals, increased the indoor concentrations of formic acid, all of which irritate the lungs. So the odor went down, but other problem things rose. If used at concentrations that do not exceed the public health standards, ozone does not remove particles at all, including particles that cause most of the things that affect allergies. If used at concentrations that do not exceed public health standards, you'll notice I keep repeating that. That's very important, because when you start using the industrial ozone machines, I'll tell you about that real quick. So an industrial ozone machine is a machine that you will take it, just in case you don't know, I know some of you do know, take it into, let's say that we're trying to get mold growth to stop, or there's a terrible cat urine odor that they can't seem to get rid of, or that there's biologicals or something that we're trying to get rid of that ozone will work with. To get that to work, you have to totally close the contaminated area airtight, stick the ozone generator on, turn it on full blast, and leave it run for 8 to 12 hours, never over 24 hours. I'll come back to that. That will kill everything. You have to remove all plants, all humans, all animals, all pets. You will go in there afterwards and have to clean up dead mice, cockroaches, because it kills everything in that room. That's the ozones that the industrial people will use for indoor environmental issues. If you go over that 24 hours, you can actually scorch the furniture, scorch the wood, scorch the stuff that was left there, and leave a really, really nasty odor for a long time. I had somebody who had to totally gut a house because they put it into the building for a week and never should have done that. It does, when you use it, that it doesn't exceed public health standards, it will not remove viruses, bacteria, mold. It will have an impact. It will help a little bit, but it's not going to help to the degree that people are purchasing those for. Some scientific studies do support the claim that ozones effectively remove some odors. So we're right back to, you have to run it to see if it's going to remove that stinky odor you're trying to get rid of. Otherwise, you're going to have to look at a temporary industrial ozone level. Recommendations, if you really want to get rid of the things, instead of buying that ozone generator, work towards controlling your methods of, controlling your indoor air pollution, which is, going after the source, and eliminate the pollutants at their source. So if it's an odor that's caused by cat urine, then it's cleaning up the cat urine. If it's an odor that's caused by biologicals, getting rid of the biologicals. Increasing outdoor air ventilation does a world of good for indoor environments. And a lot of people, I had this hospital that they rent medical offices, and all their employees were going to call in OSHA because everybody was getting headaches in the afternoon. When I went in to do the interviews, the employees were, I found out that when they opened that site, and they said it was beautiful when they got in there, the offices were great, they loved their new environment. There was a total of 4 or 5 employees in there. When I went in, I interviewed 24 people. I knew right away, without them having to spend a lot of money on testing, that they probably were breathing each other's carbon dioxide, the metabolic stuff that's made from your breathing. They were breathing each other's air. But we went on ahead and ran the 24-hour test, so that, because they had to rebut what OSHA was coming in on, and it was sure that was the problem. There was too much carbon dioxide in the air. All they had to do was change a couple things in their HVAC unit to bring in more fresh air, and they actually had HVAC techs on staff that could do that, so it wasn't a huge expense at all. And then the other thing is using proven methods of air cleaning. And I will go back and say over and over and over and over again, clean, 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 to have a healthy indoor environment. We don't have to be pristine. I don't clean house. Oh, I don't clean house much at all, but I do clean house. I have somebody come in and clean every 2 weeks, and then we do the stuff in between. Cleanliness really is a great thing for indoor environment. So if you have questions on that, go ahead and shoot those over to the monitor. Myth: sick building syndrome is a hoax. Boy, I hear this one a lot. That's the only thing about sick building syndrome, is all the crazy people are the ones putting it in there. First of all, don't confuse sick building syndrome with building-related illness. They are 2 totally different things. Sick building syndrome is pretty much a situation where the occupants are experiencing acute health issues, discomfort issues that can be linked to when they're in the building, but not a specific illness, and you can't figure out what the cause is. That is what sick building syndrome is. Building-related illness is when you have symptoms that are diagnosable and that you can identify what the source is. That is like when I said that 80% of the investigations turn out to be mold. That would be a building-related illness. Those people were sick. They were sick. It was a mold contamination sickness, and we were able to identify what the problem is. So I'm going to try to hit this quick, but the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, OSHA, they prefer that we don't say sick building syndrome. They prefer we use the word indoor air quality. 20% of the workforce right now have symptoms: watering eyes, hoarseness, headaches, dry itchy skin, dizziness, nausea, heart palpitations, miscarriages, shortness of breath, nosebleeds, chronic fatigue, mental fogginess, tremors, swelling of the legs or ankles, cancer. The building may be labeled as a sick building, and these are the symptoms that they're suffering from. It's a telling factor as if the symptoms ease when the workers leave and go home, or they go on vacation. That's when you know for sure there really is a problem with the indoor air quality. It's kind of like Lyme disease. If you go online and research Lyme disease, there are like 500 symptoms from Lyme disease. Most Lyme disease patients only have 4 or 5 of the 500 symptoms. It's the same way with building-related illnesses, sick building syndrome. You can have 500 different things, but where you really know is it sick building syndrome is, do you feel relief when you leave the building? In 1984, the WHO, the World Health Organization, reported that up to 30% of new and remodeled buildings worldwide could be subject to excessive complaints related to indoor environments. Now, we're right back. How can that happen? It's a brand new building. Well, think about it. In a brand new building, just like I said, we're making them really tight now. While they were building it, they had the frame up, but they didn't have the walls up, and it's raining. Spores are hitting that, the mold starts to grow, and then it dies off, and they put the walls up, no mold issue until they have a humidity event, and then you start having mold issues. Also, if they didn't have the HVAC designed right, if the contaminants were brought in by employees, now you're trapped with the contaminants in that building and can't get them out. So that's why 30% of the buildings will have a problem even though they're brand new. Plus you have the off-gassing of VOCs, which people are not paying attention to as well. So it's important to note, some sick building syndrome, illness may have not been contracted outside, may have been contracted outside the building. So if you've got some pollution going on in the parking lot and employees are bringing it in, then they automatically think it's the building that's making them sick when it's really the parking lot. The person that's reporting the sick building syndrome may have an acute sensitivity. And then we start to argue, is that their problem or the building's owner's problem? Because I think that we should both be taking responsibility if you have an acute sensitivity. The person that's reporting it may be experiencing job-related stress or dissatisfaction. So they come in every day to work, they're sick, they're calling it sick building syndrome, but really it's because they're sick of being at work. And then, of course, we have all the psychosocial factors that play into it, which is Emily's complaining all the time, that then Kendra starts to get the same disorder, and then Heather starts to get the same disorder. It's really all psychosocial, psychosomatic, and yes, some people will find out that their sick building syndrome is psychosomatic. However, I would argue that there definitely is a sick building syndrome thing going on out there. Causes of sick building syndrome. Typically, when you go to doing the investigation, you find out that it was inadequate ventilation. So one of the #1 causes of sick building syndrome is not enough fresh air. Chemical contaminants from indoor sources, so housekeeping's not storing stuff right, or chemicals were used during renovations and have contaminated the environment. Biological contaminants, which I just went over that with the whole thing, what happens when we're building houses, and the mold's going to kind of lay dormant till it gets wet. Also, we have to really watch the humidity levels. To have a decent humidity in a building, it should average between 35 and 40%. Those of you that sat in my seminar a couple months ago heard this. If you get it below 35, 40%, human bodies need moisture. So our skin will begin to crack, our lips will begin to crack, we'll get nosebleeds, we'll have dry eye syndrome, our lips will tap. That's because we're not getting enough moisture, and part of the moisture we get is from our environment. However, when that moisture starts to go up and get to 50%, warning bells should go off. We should have an alarm. We don't have to do anything yet, but it's going to get dangerous. Hit 60%, and that is the perfect environment for mold growth. So those dead spores that were laying in the wall that rooted while the house was being built but then didn't do anything because it was dry, we have a humidity event in the building, so now they start to grow. And then it gets dry again, so they stop, and then we have another humidity event, so it grows again. Then it dries and it stops to grow, and then we have another humidity event. Well, you go on with multiple humidity events over a 5-year period of time. The building was new 5 years ago. Today it's 5 years old, and we're starting to experience mold in the building. Well, that mold's always been there. It just doesn't become an unhealthy environment until the mold colonies reached a certain size and we're able to start influencing what was going on in the environment. So very important to control the humidity in our environment as well. So solutions to sick building syndrome: expensive testing is not always warranted. I really don't recommend it. Quite often, if you have a certified indoor environmentalist come in and take a walkthrough, they might see, just like I did with the person doing dishes and like the person with the fireplace and the office that had many employees in it, sometimes you can identify it really, really easy. The reason that the owner of the building or the occupants aren't identifying it is because when you live with it every single day, you don't realize that it's coming upon you, and it's getting that fresh set of eyes in to look at it that can show you that, hey, this is the problem. We don't have to do testing. Let's just try this, and if that works, then you have the answer. Pollutant source removal, very, very important. If you can get to the source of the problem, or a modification, they are really good, effective approaches to resolving the indoor air quality when the sources are known and the control is feasible. But when the sources can't be known, then the only thing you can do is test. There are 10,000 tests you can run to figure out what an indoor problem is. My recommendation is to start with the most popular ones, which I hit a little bit earlier: carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, ozone, humidity. There's like 7 of them that you would want to test first, because again, outside of mold, they then have become the most popular problems of indoor environmental pollution. Increasing the ventilation, air distribution often can be a very costly way of reducing indoor pollution levels. You dilute it. Quite often, indoor air quality can be improved just by having your HVAC looked at. The design could have been bad. I had a college in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, that they got entire dorm building was contaminated with mold, and it was all because the HVAC system was brand new when they renovated, and it was too big for the building, so it was not running cycling right. They had to make quite a few adjustments, but once they got adjusted right, and had 2 different mold remediation projects before they figured it out, but when they did figure it out, that is a beautiful building now. Duct cleanliness, we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but doing a duct cleanliness inspection, because quite often the source of the problem is in the ductwork. So if you get the ducts, you don't clean your ducts, but do an inspection to see if they need cleaned. Quite often you can identify the source there as well. And then checking air filters. You don't know how many times that I've gone in and people just didn't think about it. They don't have it on their maintenance list to check their air filters regularly, so they're all clogged up with dirt. I even had one place that when I went to check their air filters in their HVAC, they had not put any in. Or somebody forgot to put them in. So checking the HVAC unit, and then checking air filters, not just in the ductwork, but if they have those little mini air filtration systems on their vacuum cleaners, everywhere, air filters need to be cleaned regularly for them to work properly. And then confirm that the local exhaust ventilation is actually exhausting outside. Lots and lots, especially in the old houses, the bathrooms, they exhaust their bathroom humidity air, they exhaust it into the attic, which all they're doing is pulling the moisture from their bathroom to the attic. Then the attic becomes contaminated. So making sure that all of our ventilation is exhausted outside. And then that's particularly true for restrooms, copy rooms, and printing facilities. If you another place where you get a lot of problems with indoor pollution in an office building, it's because they bought a bigger printer without realizing that they also need to be able to exhaust that printing room. A lot of pollution comes off of our printers. Air cleaning can be useful in conjunction with source control. That's those little air filtering systems. They really do work. There's all different types out there right now, so it's getting the one that best fits your indoor environment. But when you use that with getting rid of the source problems and taking care of the ventilation, it really, really helps. Air cleaning can be very useful, but it is not the full solution. It's just using it in conjunction with source. Typically, a mold remediation is one, absolutely positively must find the source of the moisture that caused the mold to begin with. If you do not do that, 12, 24 hours, 72 hours later, you will have to redo the entire mold remediation again, because moisture is the #1 key factor. You never can get rid of all the spores, so they're going to come back again. Mold's going to come back again if you don't get rid of the source problem, which is moisture. That's #1. So once you've done that, you've addressed it, you got rid of it. Now you need to you need to go through. What are you going to keep and what are you going to throw away? So if this was a really, really bad mold problem, and you have antiques that you want to keep, you put them outside, you're going to need to restore them. If you have anything porous like couches, baby dolls, toys, blankets, my recommendation is to pitch them, because you will never get the roots out of this. Now I'm talking about an extensive mold remediation. So you go through, decide what you're going to clean, what you're not, anything you can get out. Throw away, put in the dumpster what you're going to throw away. The things that you're going to restore, you want to keep them outside, totally away from the environment that you're going to remediate. I would also recommend If you've got to carry them from the mold contaminated environment through a clean environment to get them outside, wrap them first, because all the spores will fly off of them into your clean environment. Then it's going and clean. You gotta any trim, anything that's moldy that you can throw out, I would. And then anything that you can't, like your structural components, then you would clean it, scrub it down, get it as clean as you possibly can. HEPA vacuum it, clean it again, HEPA vacuum it again, and then if you've got concrete walls, structural components, you can encapsulate them. You're not encapsulating them to make them look pretty, although it does look pretty when you're done, but you're doing it to suffocate any spores that you couldn't get out, because it's really hard to get rid of all the spores. Running air scrubbers the whole time you're doing this, containing the area so you don't cross-contaminate, and then run post-remediation samples to be sure that the level of mold spores is now low. If you have not gotten it low enough, then you need to clean again, or you missed the colony and you need to investigate again. Does that